My name is Connell and I'm a healthy eating coach, and I specialize in the paleo diet and gluten-free. Today we're going to be talking about how to make sweet and delicious banana and chocolate muffins. And this recipe is very versatile because the base of the recipe, which is the basic batter, can be utilized for so many things. You can use it for any type of muffin, where you can put in blueberries or banana nut muffins or cranberry, lemon poppy seed, I mean, you name it. It's just limited by our own creativity. But also you can use it as a base for a cake of any type. You can add cocoa powder and make it into a chocolate cake. You can frost them and make them into vanilla cupcakes. It's really limitless. So it gives you the basic recipe for it. So today we're going to do banana and chocolate chip muffins, and they're just so delicious. So what we're going to start with is we're going to take cassava flour. Now, for those of you that are not so familiar with the paleo diet, it is a diet that's free of grain. So that means we don't eat any of the grains with gluten, but also any of the gluten-free grains. So no rice, no corn flour, no amaranth or millet, which, those grains definitely have some benefits to them. But when you choose to adopt a paleo lifestyle, you're really avoiding any type of grain. So what we're looking for are flours that are free of grain. So there's a ton of different flours, certainly some nut flours like almond flour and cashew flour. You can make flour out of seeds like sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds that I use in my cauliflower bread that I make, that I have a post on my website about. But there's also flours made out of roots, and in particular cassava flour. Cassava flour is more from the Caribbean region of the world. And many of you actually are familiar with it in the sense that tapioca starch is the same root. The tapioca root is the cassava root, but tapioca starch is the starch of the plant, and cassava flour is the entire flour of the root. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 3/4 cup of cassava flour, and that's going to be the largest amount of flour in our dish. And it doesn't have to be exact, but the more exact, the more it comes out the way you want. And there's your 3/4 cups of cassava flour. Now we're going to also take about 1/3 cup of tapioca starch. And there's that. We're going to add them to the mixer. And then sometimes I use potato starch, but if people are trying to avoid white potatoes, then what I'll do is use arrowroot powder. Now, arrowroot powder, sometimes you find it in a small little jar in the spice aisle of the grocery store, but you can also order big bags of it if you find you use a lot of it. I tend to use a lot of arrowroot also in my pizza crust recipe that I use, so I found that getting a big bag is really helpful. So I'm going to do about 1/3 cup of arrowroot. Well. And then ground flax. Now you can buy ground flax at the store, but I love to make it from scratch because there's so many wonderful beneficial oils from the flax seed when it's ground fresh. And if it sits in the bag or the container for too long, the oils can become rancid and then they're more inflammatory. So if you can make it yourself, it's fantastic, or you can certainly buy it in the store. I use 1/2 cup of the ground flax. And there's different types of flax seeds. There's darker ones, and then there's also golden flax seeds. It really doesn't matter for the nature of this recipe. Although if you use the darker ones, it does make the batter a little bit darker. Then we're going to take a teaspoon of baking soda. We want it to rise. And we're going to take 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And because a little bit of salt makes everything sweeter, that's what most bakers attest to, you're going to put 1/4 teaspoon of what I like to do is sea salt. That's typically what I use at home. And that's your dry mix. And so now what we're going to do is just turn on the mixer to just incorporate the flours so that they're not disproportionately mixed. And just let it really mix well on low so you don't have the flour going everywhere all over your kitchen. And when it's well mixed, then you can start on the wet part of the batter. Now, these recipes are always so simple because really you do all the dry in the mixer, then you do all the wet in your separate container, then you pour the wet into the dry, and there's your batter. So typically what I do is I put 2 eggs into this batter. But today I wanted to do a bit of a different variation on a theme for those people that are egg-free. So what I did was I took chia seeds, and I'm using them as a substitute for eggs. Now the typical ratio for that substitution is 1 egg. You can substitute by doing 1 tablespoon of chia seeds and 3 tablespoons of water. And then what you do is you mix it together and you just let it sit on the counter for 15 minutes or longer until it becomes gelatinous, until it has that sort of gelatinous consistency. It's not the prettiest thing to look at in the mug, but it works really well to bring together the batter. But this recipe calls for 2 eggs. So I just increased, essentially doubled the recipe, and I put in 2 tablespoons of chia seeds. These are whole chia seeds, but you can use ground as well. And then 6 tablespoons of water, and I mixed it together and let it sit on the counter. And so that I'm going to put in once it's already in that gelatinous state. And I'm going to mix it in here, or add it to my bowl. And then I'm going to continue to add the rest of the wet ingredients. So I'm going to put in 1/2 cup of olive oil. And I typically like to use extra virgin. It's just the type of olive oil that I have at home. It's a wonderful, there's wonderful health benefits to olive oil, but you can certainly use avocado oil if you prefer to have more of a neutral flavor, or coconut oil. I'm going to pour that in there. And then you want to have a little bit of milk. When you do the paleo diet, you typically avoid milk, or just if you have milk sensitivities. There are so many milk substitutes today. I love to use hemp milk, which is made out of hemp seeds, because my daughter has a coconut sensitivity, but coconut milk is a great substitute. There's all kinds of different milk options. So I put in, well, somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 cup of milk. Doesn't matter so much. And I'm going to put that in there. And then I like to sweeten these with maple syrup. It's just a really great sweetener. So and maple syrup has a ton of beautiful minerals to it. So it's a really healthy treat, assuming that you're not trying to reduce your sugars because of insulin resistance or some sort of diabetic situation that you have or diagnosis. But if that's not the case, you can definitely use maple syrup. It's very healthy for you. And you can also cut down the amount if you're wanting to do that. But I typically put in 1/2 cup. You know, conventional muffin and cupcake and cake recipes typically call for 1 cup or 1.5 cups of sugars, and it's just so much and not necessary typically. But if you're reducing the liquid, you have to consider, you know, the proportion of the recipe. So this calls for 1/2 cup of maple syrup, and then vanilla extract, which gives it that nice vanilla aftertone or undertone. So I typically do 2 teaspoons of vanilla. I like to get a vanilla extract that doesn't have added sugar to it. Just one more way that you can support the health of your body. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to whisk. And the last ingredient that we want to put in here is mashed banana. You don't have to mash it very strongly in the sense that it can still be a little lumpy to give it texture in the muffin, but it's delicious when you add it in. So I'm going to peel my banana and throw away the peels. And I'm going to throw away kind of the 2 ends because I just don't need, there's a very large banana that I chose, and I didn't need that much. Typically I do a small to a medium-sized banana, but it's definitely a forgiving recipe. And what I'm going to do is just use a fork, a kitchen fork, to mash it. And again, if you mash it entirely, that's fine. If you want to have a little bit more texture, the banana flavor in the muffin, then you can leave it a little bit lumpy. If it's ripe, it's better, of course, for baking because it gives a little bit more of that natural sweetness. And so I'm just going to mash it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add it into my wet batter. wet mixture, and then continue to whisk it in with the other wet ingredients. So as you can see, I've mashed it up here pretty well, and I'm going to add it in here, and then I'm going to whisk it in pretty well so that it's pretty well incorporated. Almost looks like there's poppy seeds in here because of the chia seeds. They kind of give that sort of presentation. But when the muffins are done, you don't actually see that because it just gets incorporated into the color of the batter. So that's pretty well mixed up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the mixer on low, and I'm going to pour this in. I'm going to start on low so that the flour that's in there doesn't go all over the kitchen. And then I'm going to go on medium. Now, sometimes during this time I'm putting my muffin baking cups inside the muffin tin, but I've already done that for today. But then sometimes what I'm doing during the 60 seconds of mixing. If it's eggs, you really don't want to over-mix it, so 60 seconds is usually enough. A lot of times what you want to do midway through is lower the mixer and just scrape any sort of excess batter off of the paddle, because you might have clumps of dry, and then when you're eating the muffin it would have a little bit of a disproportionate texture and flavor. So you're going to do that and then mix it again to just incorporate those last bits. Great. Now, the last thing we want to add are the chocolate chips. Now, you can absolutely buy any type of chocolate chips that you're interested in, or chocolate chunks. I've definitely been known to make my own chocolate, which will be for sure a new post at some point soon on how to do that, and then just chop it up into chunks, leave it in a Ziploc bag in your freezer, and constantly you just grab a handful and throw it into a batter of anything from muffins to cakes to pancakes and so on. But in this case, you can also buy. So there's definitely different companies out there that have dairy-free chocolate chips that don't have refined sugars. There's a company called Lily's that uses stevia. There's also a little bit of sugar alcohol in it as well, but mostly it's stevia sweetened, and they're pretty good. But one of my favorite chocolate companies is a company called Hue Kitchen. They're actually based out of New York City, and they have a restaurant in New York City. I think it's near Union Square. And it's all paleo fare, and it's delicious. And of course, everywhere you look, they have chocolate bars everywhere. And so they have the simple chocolate. They have chocolate with a little bit of sea salt in it. That's just so delicious. And they also have chocolate with different nut butters. My favorite is their chocolate bar that has hazelnut butter in it, because it totally tastes like Nutella. From my old life when I used to eat that a lot. And being Israeli, in Israel, they have something called mibrachit chocolate, which just means chocolate spread. It's so delicious, but full of sugar. So this is a cancel. Sorry. Okay, we're done. That was my time to put things in the oven. So I've got my chocolate, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop it up. It's as simple as that, and I'm going to get a good sized knife, and I'm going to start by just breaking it up into the cubes that are already outlined on the chocolate bar, and then I'm just going to break it up into little chunks. And you know, it doesn't have to be that pretty. Unless you really wanted to, then you should probably buy chocolate chips. This is more in the chocolate chunk family. And the sharper your knife, the more chunks you're going to have and the less shavings you're going to have. Chocolate has some really great benefits to it, certainly a lot of minerals to it, but again, if you're really trying to avoid sugars, maybe you have insulin resistance or pre-diabetes or diabetes, then you might choose to do a muffin that has bittersweet chocolate in it, or maybe just avoid the chocolate altogether. Chocolate does have caffeine in it, so if you're trying to avoid caffeine, that's something else to consider. So we're going to leave those last 4 squares for me as a treat, and we're going to take the chocolate chunks, about a third to a half a cup. You can put in as many as you want. And then we're just going to mix it in on low as if we're just folding in the chocolate chips. It looks nice and chocolate chunky. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the mixing bowl and scrape it off the paddle. We don't want to lose any of this. Yeah. And before I did all this, I did preheat my oven to 350 degrees. And so it's already preheated, and I also put muffin or baking cups inside my muffin tray, which you can see. And I like to use the unbleached ones, but really, let's say it's a festive occasion and you're needing some kind of color for maybe your kid's birthday party, then you use what you use. Now this is an ice cream scooper that I like to use to scoop the muffin batter out because it helps me to have the sort of proportionate amount in each one. So I'm just going to scoop out and look at each one. Now, the difference in texture from egg-free with the chia seeds versus egg is it's a little bit more dense without the egg, but these muffins, you really don't taste it too much. That kind of, classic gummy texture that you get from not having eggs and things that you bake, but it's really not too apparent. I'm starting to run out of batter, which is okay, so I might not have 12. I made them bigger, but you can certainly make them be whatever size you want. All right. What's nice also without the eggs is you can definitely scoop out the remainder of the batter and lick the bowl. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees. In the middle of the oven, and you're going to bake it for 24, 25 minutes. It really depends on your oven. If it's not convection, it's probably a little bit longer, but you just want to keep an eye on it, and when it's golden brown on top, you can do the toothpick test and see if the batter is fully cooked all the way through. Okay, and now because of the video and not wanting to take so long waiting for the muffins to be done, I bake some in advance. So let's give them a try. So these are the done chocolate chip banana muffins. And so we are going to try one. And see, the paper comes off really easily. And let's see here. They're so moist. And you can see the texture. You see a little bit of the flax in there and the chocolate chunks. Give it a try. They are so moist. Delicious. I actually baked these a few hours ago in the morning in preparation for this video. And they still have that delicious moist texture, but it's like a muffin. So it's not overly moist either, and you can definitely taste the vanilla. And you can taste the chocolate for sure and some of the banana. But it has such a wonderful rustic flavor to it because it has the flax in it. And it's just a different type of muffin, but it tastes very similar in texture. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you make this at home. And if you are interested in learning and watching more videos and seeing more posts on various types of paleo and gluten-free recipes, please check out my health and food blog at ayellatconnellwellness.com. And I'd love to hear from you, any ideas for future posts, your wish list of things you'd like to see me make or find substitutions for in the paleo and gluten-free world. Just drop me a line on Facebook or through my website. I'd love to hear from you.